Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our Michigan Game Day show for The Game. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. As is our tradition in previewing the Ohio State game, we are joined by the angel of the Big House, Detroit News beat writer Angelique Chengelis. This is the 13th year she's joined me. It would be 14, but we all remember the game was canceled during COVID. We'll also hear some of what Ryan Day had to say at his Tuesday presser. Before that, let's start with my view from Section 17. What a season it has been. We kicked off in September. Jim was suspended for 3 games. He didn't like it, but we all thought that was it. Then 3 weeks ago, the whole sign-stealing story broke. Since then, the story has taken so many twists and turns it makes your head spin. The NCAA, the Big Ten, social media, all media really. The noise has been deafening and distracting. Then Jim was suspended for the final 3 games of the season. We never imagined this is where we would be as the game approached, but here we are. This Michigan team has been workmanlike each week with or without Jim. We even survived a battle on the road last week because we refused to lose. This team has been mentally and physically tough. They have proven that week after week. On Saturday, Ohio State will enter the Big House undefeated and playing their best football of the year. Never has there been so much on the line, and never has this rivalry been so heated for reasons on and off the field. You know what I mean. And there will be time later to understand what, if anything, Ryan Day and Ohio State had to do with this NCAA probe. The atmosphere on Saturday will be what dreams are made of. Let's hope the boys shut out the noise, rise to the occasion, and give us what I think would be the biggest win in the history of this rivalry and one of the biggest in program history. As Bob Ufer used to say, you have 60 minutes of football to play and a lifetime to remember. And you will remember. So will we. At his Tuesday presser, Ryan Day was asked if he thought his offensive line was ready to do battle with that Michigan defensive front.
Yeah, you're seeing improvement every week. You're seeing a group that works together. You're seeing progressions, individually and as a unit. And so, they're going to do a great job today of getting out there on a Tuesday practice and working at their craft and preparing to go play at a high level and then go compete for 4 quarters. But like you said, week in and week out, we come in, we talk about the progress in different areas. I think you've seen it in that area. So, I think their confidence is as high as it's been all season.
Day was asked if the seeming lack of respect in the rivalry saddens or energizes him.
With everything going on and the things, that are out there, we just kind of stayed away from all the distractions we have, and just focused on our team. And I think our guys have done a good job of it. I think, when you talk to our guys, I've talked to them a couple of times about, what's gone on this season and going into the game. But, they're focused on this game. They're focused on this season. They're focused on their preparation. And we're just going to continue on that.
My guest today says it is almost impossible to get a read on this game Both teams are very good, and emotions in this rivalry have never been higher. With us next for our annual preview of the game is the angel of the Big House, beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. So don't go away. Joining us on our game day show as we get ready for the game, as we have done 13 of the last 14 years, darn COVID got in the way a few years ago, is beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. Welcome back, Angelique.
A tradition like no other, Mike.
It is a tradition, and again, we just missed that COVID year, but it's always been a lot of fun. And of course, the last few years we've had so much to talk about. It's been so much fun. But you and I talked about this before we started taping. We would like to talk about the game and only that, but in the world we're living in right now, there's a lot going on. Sort of a cloud hovering over the game, the Michigan program. And I keep thinking the fact Jim will not be on the sidelines is something we've known would be the case for over a week. But still, in the game, a game of this magnitude, it's just strange to think about, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, they really did. His lawyers and the university lawyers wanted to fight the suspension from the Big Ten and ensure that Harbaugh would be on the sideline for this game. But obviously that didn't happen. And I think you're right. I think it's going to be when those players are at the mouth of the tunnel getting ready to run out, and maybe it'll hit them earlier, but that's when you see him, leading the team out on the field. And you didn't see that last week. You didn't see it at Penn State. And but this is the game. And there was a reason they wanted to fight for him and get that suspension blocked, and it was for this game, and it's going to be really strange, and I think the players are very resilient, but certainly and they have Harbaugh there all week during practices, up until the moment when they leave for the stadium, they have their coach, but they don't have him on the sideline, and it does make a difference, and I think it makes a difference for one key player in particular. I think J.J. McCarthy really misses having him on the sideline. So it's just all very strange on so many levels, Mike.
It is. Well, a lot of writers and media people are asking an interesting question this week. It's who has more pressure on them, Sharon Moore or Ryan Day? What would you think about that?
I really think it's Ryan Day. I mean, he's lost the last two games in the series, and he's coaching against. And this is no offense to Sharon Moore, but he is the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach, who is suddenly now the acting head coach. And I think it would be very tough for him to lose to Sharon just because he is not the head coach. And not that he couldn't be the head coach, but he is not the head coach of the University of Michigan. He's the acting head coach. And I really think, losing 3 in a row to Michigan would be, I don't want to say catastrophic. It's just a game, but it would be a really tough thing, I think, for Ryan Day and for the Ohio State fans to handle.
And I think most fair-minded observers of this game are going to say the talent is pretty even on both sides of the ball. A big part of this game is your frame of mind, your attitude. And I like to think Michigan is going to be able to shut out the noise. Jim talked about that at his Monday presser. But, these guys are still 18 to 22-year-olds. They have access to social media. So for me, the question isn't, are they going to be prepared? It's how much is this affecting them? And in the last 2 weeks, doesn't seem like maybe a lot, but in a game of this magnitude, you really don't know yet, do you?
No, you don't. But I will say this, Mike. I mean, I've been really impressed with this team and just how they have focused and how they have maintained the mantra of be where your feet are. And one-track minds and all the things they say, which I'm sure they are talking about that every day and being reminded that that's what the goal is. It's just focused on the next day, nothing else, the next game, pardon me. And I have been really impressed with how this team has, it seems to me like they've been able to really shut out the noise. And there has been a lot of it. I mean, you know that, I know that. There's a lot of noise around this team. And, and I think Harbaugh has done a good job. I think he's compartmentalized and when he's with the team, he smiles a lot and he doesn't talk about, this is terrible, what's going on. He doesn't talk about that. He focuses on the players and their task at hand. And I think that the players do appreciate that. And I think they've responded to that and they have been able to shut things out. I mean, Trevor Keegan said he dropped his Twitter account and stuff so he wouldn't be looking at this stuff all the time. And that's probably a really good move and probably something all the players should do because it is noisy. It can be a distraction, but I haven't seen it yet. And I got to believe that they are so zoned in on this game that it won't be an issue.
Well, all of that aside, and we're going to hear plenty of talk in the next few days about all of that. Let's talk about the game. I think it's fair to say Ohio State is peaking and they are healthy now. And Michigan does have some injuries, especially at the offensive tackle positions. And I know Sharon on Monday said those guys should be good to go. But we've seen in the last 2 weeks pressure coming off the edges against that offense. So there are some issues to work on with that offensive line, aren't there?
Yeah, and Mike, I have been saying it a lot this season that this is a good offensive line. It's not the Joe Moore award-winning line of the last 2 seasons. And when you say that, you feel like you're knocking players, and I'm not. But I think Drake Nugent's a very good center. He's not Olu with Timmy. Ryan Hayes maybe was underrated. I don't know how people felt about Ryan Hayes, but he was a really good tackle. And Ladarius, I've talked to different people who really know the position. He's good. He's not a great left tackle. And then you brought Miles Hinton in last Saturday at Maryland. He gets hurt. Carson certainly has had his issues in pass protection. And you can't do what you did against Penn State. I mean, that's just not going to work against Ohio State and running the ball 32 straight times. And I think the offensive line has been an issue. We talk about the run game and where's it been, and it's easy to say, well, Blake and Donovan aren't running as hard as they did last season. But I really put a lot of it on the offensive line, not all of it. Clearly, Donovan has had his share of struggles this season, but just every aspect of the offensive line is just not as good. And I think people got spoiled by how good this line was the last 2 years. And I do wonder because Sharon has so much on his plate. He's trying to coach these guys, and he even said, when defense is on the field, he trusts Minter to take care of everything. And I watched him. I mean, he's on the sideline. He's with those guys, coaching them. You can't suddenly coach them to be the Joe Moore award-winning line on Saturday. So I think they're going to have to really figure out the best way because this is the best defense that this line's going to face. And there's going to be a lot of pressure. And you saw against Purdue, JJ took 3 sacks. He took a sack last week. I mean, and he's hobbled a little bit, so you just can't afford to let this guy get hit. So it's going to be really interesting to me how they try to protect him. I mean, Donovan missed a block last week and allowed JJ to get sacked. So I don't know. I do think to me, that's the most critical aspect of this game is how well can this offensive line play on Saturday. And you never know. They may be able to step it up and because of the magnitude of the game and do what they need to do. But I just think that the track record has not been outstanding this season.
No, it is a concern against this Ohio State defense on Saturday. And we have to say they are much better than last year's in every measurable way. And I would go so far as to say after, talking to Ohio State media folks this week, they don't think they have to load up the box like last year. I think lesson learned there. I bet they think after watching Michigan the last 2 weeks, and this could be right or wrong, that they think they can pretty much go straight up defensively, either nullify or hold this offense in check based on what they've seen. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I do think that they are going to play it that way, Ohio State, I mean. And that's probably the fair way to do it. And it's just but last season Michigan didn't have Blake Corum, and you had Donovan Edwards, who just, had the huge game he had. And then the big knock going into that game last year was, JJ's not throwing the deep ball, really hasn't connected, and that worked. So, I do think they play him straight up, and I think that Michigan's offense is balanced in that sense. It's, again, you haven't seen the explosive runs like you saw last season from Blake Corum, but you've seen some hints of it. He had the 44-yard run 2 weeks ago, and I think JJ I think last week was a tough week for him with the ankle. I think from what I was talking to people, that maybe it was in his head a little bit during practice all last week. He took every rep, but I think that they find something different. They find a different gear in this game, and no matter how Ohio State plays them defensively, it's going to be mano a mano. And it's going to be really interesting to see if there's a wrinkle that Michigan pulls out offensively, because I really keep thinking every week, Mike, that the tight ends are going to play a bigger role. And I keep having that feeling that Colston's ready for a big game, and I don't know why Saturday wouldn't be the one.
Well, do you think this is a game where we're going to find out, and I know this really isn't fair, but it's the way it is, if JJ is the kind of quarterback that can put the team on his back and win a game of this magnitude? Because, for years we talked about one of the huge differences between these two teams was the quarterback play. Ohio State's had so many outstanding quarterbacks. Now we have JJ. It's a big ask, but, this is a game where legends are made.
Yeah, it is. And, I think when you look at last year's game in Columbus, Michigan hadn't won there since 2000. And I thought he played admirably. He really did. And I think he's absolutely capable. And this is a game where, he's probably not going to be 100%. Nobody is at this point of the season. And he is going to have to take them on his shoulder and put them there and get them to victory. And yes, I think he's absolutely capable. Again, I referenced this earlier. I do think he misses Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. I think that they communicate a lot during games. I think that it's just it's a comfort for him in a way to have him there. And that's no offense to Kirk Campbell, nothing against Sharon Moore. I just think that they have a different relationship. So he needs to, if that's the case, he needs to try to move on from that. And, I watched him after he threw that pick against Maryland. And this is a guy who never gets angry. And I just watched him go to the sideline, and he kind of slammed his helmet down on the hook that's behind the bench, and he sat down, and he just looked – I hadn't seen JJ look angry like that, Mike, in a while, and he slammed his right hand down, and all the players came up and were comforting him and patting him on the head, and then you saw him come back out, and I thought he was throwing bullets after that. Like, he was really, I thought, making a point the way he was throwing. So, in a sense, he talks a lot about that Bowling Green game, how much he needed that humbled him at that point because he had been so consistent and so accurate. And, like Blake Corum said after the Maryland game, maybe they needed it. Maybe they needed to face that kind of pressure and that heat and know that the game was still really up for grabs toward the end. And I wonder if that's what JJ needed. And if he can translate that on Saturday, because I do think he's absolutely capable of doing as you asked in your question. Well,
comparing these two defenses is really interesting on paper and the eye test too, but there isn't much of a difference statistically. And, all year we've talked about just how good this Michigan defense is or has been. The Ohio State defense is really the same. So, when you look at this game and you scout it, you think which defense can be more effective, cause more chaos, create turnovers, is going to be one of the huge factors in this game, isn't it?
Oh, it is. You look at the stats. It's pretty remarkable. I don't want to say it's looking in the mirror, but it's pretty close to it. They're 1-2 in scoring defense. They're 1-2. Ohio State's 1 and Michigan 2 in pass defense. And, Ohio State's given up a little bit more in the run game, but not much. And, they're 1-3, Michigan being 1 in total defense. So they are very close. I have been very impressed with Michigan in its ability to, they talk about their 4 pillars on defense. And and being ball disruption, and they have done that. And then you've got a guy like Mike Sandersville, who had the 2 picks last week, and he's been really vital. And then you look at Kenneth Grant, what he's been able to do, going back to the running down to the tailback at Penn State, and then last week his big play. I mean, they're getting a lot of contributions from a lot of different guys on this defense. You're definitely seeing a lot of Mike Sandersville, so it's not spreading around completely. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen enough of Ohio State's game. I've watched the games. But to see who has been really standing out each week for them on defense, like I've seen Michigan, and there's just so many weapons and on Michigan's defense. And, you know, Jesse Minter is a terrific defensive coordinator, and Jim Knowles is being the coordinator that Ohio State, when Ryan Day hired him, that they hoped he would be. So that is going to be that. I mean, I love great defensive games, Mike. So I'm sort of hoping for that, and that's why I think it'll be more of a low scoring game. But it's been, you know, this Michigan defense, I mean, when they've needed the big plays from the defense, they have come through, and that's been very consistent.
Things like that make this such a hard game to gauge. If you're relying on the eye test, I know I've watched as much of Ohio State as I could this year, and I know Ohio State fans have done the same, checked out Michigan every time they've had the chance. But, you know, if there's a difference in these two teams, and I think it's a major difference, it's that Ohio State has, you know, more of the game breakers and NFL-like talent, especially at the skill positions and, you know, most notably at receiver. But they have Travion Henderson healthy. And, hey, I love Blake. I love Donovan. Travion's got sort of another gear. He is a scary guy. Not just being brutally honest, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. And having him back has really improved the Ohio State offense. I mean, he's really is a difference maker. And as much as Marvin Harrison, that everyone talks about him, I agree with you. Travion healthy is a huge add and a huge boost for this Ohio State offense. And, you know, that's one thing that this Michigan defense has. They really haven't had to face a team that has both aspects that are so good and so consistent, pass game, run game. They've been able to neutralize one and make them one-dimensional, and that's been something that's worked in Michigan's favor. But I don't see that happening on Saturday. I mean, you know, I agree with you. You know, he is different than Blake, and you know, I think Michigan has its weapons, but they don't have a Marvin Harrison. I mean, you got to assume that Roman Wilson will be back on Saturday. That's what Sharon Moore said, but you know, they haven't really had anybody else who stood out in the receiving game as much. I mean, I think you get Samaj Morgan involved. That guy is so fast. And Cornelius, again, obviously had his performance against Ohio State last week. But you're right. I mean, just across the board, the skill position guys at Ohio State are extremely good. And it's going to be an enormous test for this Michigan defense. I think they're up for it, but they have not been tested this way, and it's going to be a new experience because, you know, they saw some decent pieces against Penn State, but, you know, they're not Ohio State. And I think that they got a nice test last week at Maryland. But, again, that's not Ohio State. So this is going to be a much more difficult offensive package to defend. And yeah, those skill position players are impressive. I always wonder if JJ had Marvin Harrison to work with. You know, how different would that be? I've just always wondered if those two were on like an all-star team, what that combination would be like.
You know, the guy that's under center, Kyle McCord, is a real interest to me to watch Saturday. He's looked better and better each week. No argument there. Still, and, you know, this is no knock on him, I don't see him as the kind of guy that can take over a game. The difference between playing this game in Columbus or Ann Arbor for a first-year guy, that's huge, Angelique.
It is. And I have wondered about him, too. And I remember talking to a Michigan coach early in the season and about McCord, and he said he'll be good by the end of the season. You know, he will definitely improve. They will get him to that point where you know, he can win a game. But, you know, I agree. I mean, this is a very hard game in either environment to play well. And JJ, you know, did what he did in Columbus last year. But, you know, he also had Donovan and getting those big runs. But this is it's an intimidating game. And I have thought about that to me, that's a key for Ohio State is how does he handle it? people can talk about, the noise differential, Ohio Stadium versus Michigan Stadium, all that. And I really think this is going to be a pretty rowdy environment on Saturday because of all the off-field stuff. I think there's a lot of just anger and people want to just let off steam. So I think it's going to be a loud environment on Saturday. And how will he handle that? I don't know. I mean, they played Notre Dame, but that was so early in the season, and this is a different animal completely. And that was, to me, last year, that was going to be the difference. How would JJ handle it? And he was the first Michigan quarterback since Drew Henson to go in there and win. And that's not saying McCord can't do that here, but I do think that's going to be a factor for him. And will he get rattled? And I don't know that he will, but I think that's why his support cast is going to be so important for him.
Yeah, another factor you can't base anything on statistically is how 18 to 22-year-old guys are going to react in a hostile, or in Michigan's case, friendly environment. But because of what's going on, as you mentioned, with the NCAA, Jim not being on the sidelines, the environment and the crowd becomes, I think, a big X factor in this game. You look back 2 years ago, that crowd was, I never thought I'd hear a crowd like that at Michigan Stadium, the big house. I mean, ready before the game and loud the entire game. I think it's going to be even louder this Saturday, so you've got to factor in that crowd.
Oh, absolutely. And, and it's got to be something that you just don't ever sit on your hands. I mean, this is a game where the players will feed off the crowd. And, I mean, you've seen it just even watching the Lions games when they go on the road and how much support the Lions are getting and how they hear it and they hear that support. And that has to be, I think, a constant at Michigan Stadium. Even if Michigan were to be behind, I mean, they're going to absolutely need the crowd to play a role, and because the crowd does play a role. And and I agree with you. I mean, I think that there is just so much building, and there's been so much building all season because of the off-field stuff and accusations here and there, and it's all going to boil and on Saturday, and I think that does translate into a pretty maybe an angry crowd, definitely a loud crowd, and you're right, it has to be more like the 2021, not like some of the other games that we've seen at Michigan Stadium where it gets kind of quiet.
Yeah,
but it has to be. I mean, and I think the fans, the players deserve that from the fans.
All right, well, let's talk about keys to the game on Saturday, Angelique. For me, from a Michigan perspective, it's not get down by a couple of scores. Don't do that early in the first half. Try to keep it close, because Michigan just isn't built for coming from behind, or at least they haven't had to yet, and especially against a good defense like this, Angelique, you want to keep it close, don't you? You
do, and I think that they're going to try. I think that what Michigan has done well most of the season is these long, 6-7 minute drives, and I think that if they can control the ball that way, that's definitely something that would get to Ohio State's defense, and that would mean that they're getting yards on this defense and messing with them mentally. And I think that's important. I think turnovers will be important. I mean, Michigan is number 3 nationally in turnover margin, and Ohio State is, I think they're tied for 60th, something like that. So turnover margin has been significant for Michigan this year, and I think that's another part of it. And the red zone defense, they got tested last week at Maryland. That was a good thing for the defense to face. And, I think that there's so many little areas that are going to play a role. And again, special teams last week, I don't think we've talked enough about Doman and his punting. I mean, he's been exceptional this season, and certainly that punt last week to the 1 was really, really something, and a game saver in a lot of ways. And so I think that there are all these little areas that are going to come into play on Saturday. And, we can talk in the broad sense about both defenses, but it often comes down to some of these small things. Turnover margin's not a small thing, but, just the other little aspects to this game.
Yeah, and from an Ohio State perspective, I think the key for them has to be take JJ and the run game out of the equation, sort of like last year, make Michigan one-dimensional, because if they do that, it is going to be hard for Michigan. You don't morph into something in Week 12 that you haven't been all year, which is a team that throws the ball all over to win. And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But that sure seems to me to be the key, or what Ohio State's going to want to do is stop that run game and just take JJ out of the run game too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that they're probably salivating. You know, they've seen JJ the last couple of weeks. Well, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass the last 3 games, but just the ankle issue, and that's taken away that little wrinkle that he can run the ball and make and really cause havoc. And you know, I wonder if that's what they're trying to just either get that ankle well and make him still be as effective in that part of the game. I think it's gonna be tough. I mean, ankle injuries aren't easy to overcome, obviously, but I think you do whatever you can in a game like this, and they're going to need that. They're going to need that part of his game, and but you know, and I'm confident he can. I'm confident in their pass game. It's just they got to have Roman Wilson has been their surest hands, and that's why I think you got to get Colston Loveland involved too, and. You know, they're using these tight ends a lot, obviously, to shore up things on the offensive line and provide more blocking and protection. But they're going to need those different weapons. And, you know, and again, I really think Samaj Morgan is somebody who could be a backbreaker. I'm just, every time he has the ball, and I'm just sort of stunned by his speed. Mm-hmm. And you know, I know that Ohio State knows about him. It's not like he's a secret weapon or anything like that. But if they can incorporate him in a way to make that kind of big play and be a backbreaker, I think that's something that they have to look at.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Angelique. And you and I have done this preview during some pretty dark years for Michigan when it comes to this rivalry, until the last 2 years, really. Mm-hmm. And you might not agree with me, but I think even though it's at home this year, given everything that's going on around this team, I think if they beat Ohio State on Saturday, this, in my mind, will rank as one of the biggest wins in the rivalry. Do you think I'm a little bit over the top on that?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that there is a whole lot of stress on this program. I think there's a whole lot of emotion that's been bottled up from the players, and you know, they have been keeping a lid on things. They've been saying the right things. They've been talking about being focused week to week. They've worn, you know, they're not subtle, but, you know, they've got their free Harbaugh shirts. Michael Barrett was wearing a shirt that Mike Sainristil made last week. You know, they are wearing their hearts on their chests and not just their sleeves. But I think that there's a lot building here. And if they were to get that win, it would be more than just a big exhale. I mean, I think it would be something for the players to prove that, see, you know, this team can win without whatever advantages you think that this team has had. And I don't think they want to say that's what they want to prove, but I think that there is part of that, Mike. And, mm-hmm. you know, I think that there's a lot of emotion, just that I said it, just bottled up. And in that sense, I think it would just be an enormous win for them, just like last year was. I mean, that was, you know, they had won in Columbus since 2000. That was huge. They plant the flag in midfield. That was not just an exhale either. That was like finally. And I think that even though they've won 2 in a row, I agree. On Saturday, if they win, it will feel like the first time for them because of everything that they've had, that the players have had to deal with.
Fox broadcasting the game, big noon kickoff. The atmosphere is going to be probably like something we've never seen in the big house for the game. So we are looking forward to it. Here with us today as we get ready for the game. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, Angelique and I have done this 13 of the last 14 years, and always a lot of fun. Angelique, I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you're going to have take time out to have a great Thanksgiving. And man, have we talked about this before, but this game falls after Thanksgiving. I guess is something those of us who maybe are old school folks don't like as much anymore, but it is what it is. But I guess the good thing is we celebrate Thanksgiving on Thursday, and then, wow, we have the game to look forward to on Saturday.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I knew. I was complaining about that to someone the other day. I'm like, I missed the days when the game was before Thanksgiving. But it is what it is, as they say. And, yeah, I mean, I do love this week. You love this week. And I was at the Monday press conference, and I think I was bouncing. And all the other people around me are like, geez, we haven't seen you like this, Angelique. And I'm like, it's the game. This is what you kind of live for every season. And it's, and 11-0, 11-0. I mean, it's just, this is what makes it great. And despite everything we've talked about, all the off-field stuff, it's still Michigan, Ohio State. It's the colors. It's everything we're going to see and hear and smell on Saturday. And that's what's so great about this game. I'm really looking forward to it, even though it's after Thanksgiving. We've just learned to deal with it, Mike. We've just learned.
By Saturday, we won't care. Again, with us today has been beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. And again, always a pleasure having you on the show to do the game preview. And I wish you and yours a very happy Thanksgiving, Angelique. And we look forward to a next visit.
Definitely, Mike, and happy Thanksgiving. Thanks again for having me on. This has been, it's always fun. Every year I look forward to this, so thank you.
On Quick Hits today, Sharon Moore addressed team injuries on Monday, and he is hopeful the team will be at full strength for Saturday. Now, that doesn't mean everyone is healthy, but it does mean there is no way you're keeping these guys off the field. Here are a few game day notes of interest. Michigan leads the series 60-52, and there have been 6 ties. The first meeting between these two rivals was in Ann Arbor on October 16th of 1897, a 34-0 Michigan win. Last year, we crushed them in Columbus, 45-23, on November 26th. Ryan Day is at his 5th year as head man. His record is 56-6. Last year, Ohio State, went 11-2 on the season, good for 2nd in the East. They ended the season losing to Georgia 42-41 in the playoffs in the Peach Bowl. The weatherman is calling for near-perfect November football weather, partly sunny, mid-30s, with 0% chance of precipitation and some mild winds. So here we are, just days away from one of the most dramatic and important games in Michigan football history. We are painfully aware of everything going on around this football team. For 60 minutes on Saturday, they get to put all of that aside and play for all the marbles. The stakes have never been higher on so many levels. It can't get here soon enough. Next week, I hope we're back to preview the Big Ten Championship game with Iowa. If we get the job done on Saturday, we'll have our Visitors Edition on Tuesday, then our Michigan Game Day show next Thursday. So, knock on wood, we have 2 shows next week. I would like to take just a minute to wish each and every one of you a very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my little labor of love each week and for the kind words you send me. It is greatly appreciated. That will do it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory, beat Ohio State. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!